Let's move on. Next we will hear from Martin Luts from Tilde and ELCR, and Mark Fishel from the University of Tartu. He is the head of a research group for machine translation, and they will be talking about machine translation, how it works, what is needed for it. Hi, I'm one of the ones who Kadri Vidar mentioned today. I am the machinist of the machine translation. I am from Tilde, Estonia. And as a machinist, so to speak, I wouldn't want to jump into the belly of the beast right away. Let's talk about the background. Let's look at who rides the machine today, who uses the machine, who in the Estonian public sector is involved in using the machine. And to wake you up a little bit after this break, I would like to ask you, who do you see in this picture? Who is this? You? So out of the 7-8 billion people we have on Earth, this is the most typical person, the most average person. The National Geographic compiled a picture of an average world inhabitant, Earth inhabitant. So Tilde Estonia carried out a study about translation practices in the Estonian public sector, and something that very clearly was defined is that the average public sector employee, how they use translation. They use Estonian English and English Estonian the most. And they know how to use translation. They use machine translation more than the help of colleagues to check terminology, whether it's correct. They use either Google Translate or the Tilde machine translation to check single terms in the Estonian English language combination. Russian, French, these are languages that they don't speak. So machine translation can help a lot, especially when it comes to things like emails, for example, reading emails. Two areas, the economy and the legal sphere. These are by far the biggest areas where machine translation is used the most. So it's reasonable and it's sensible to train machines to use these fields the most. And luckily we have a lot of terminology in these fields. And our president used the translation memory to translate the literary passages, which is impossible. But the economy and law are good fields for machine translation. On average, officials spend at least 1 hour a day on working with foreign language texts a day. And 65% of them say that they have gotten an average amount of help, a fair amount of help, or a good amount of help from machine translation. 550 public sector workers participated in this study, and it was Lauri Valge, a master student from the Tallinn University, who carried out the study. So, if you're interested, you can look at this master's thesis. The study was carried out by a master's student at the University of Tallinn. Something that is recognized is that using Google Translate is very problematic. People know that we have this 3-tiered security level in the Estonian public sector, and that does pose problems in terms of machine translation as well. And when it comes to translation memory, whether it's translation quality, is translation memories, these have to be assessed more in terms of quality. But overall, the study found that we believe in machine translation, whether it's human assisted or not. In any case, it helps with the whole process. So that's the point of view from the machinist side of things, and an overview of what an average official does in terms of translation memory. These were self-reported. This is self-reported data according to questionnaires. And the interpreter apologizes, can't hear if the speaker doesn't speak into the microphone. So now word over to Mark Fishel from the University of Tartu. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay, it works. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Fishel from the University of Tartu from the Computer Sciences Institute. I am a linguist and I am an expert in SMT, and I'm glad to answer questions about, for example, how MT is applied, how our company uses it, and also I would gladly take questions about how to capture human language, or whether some people say, aren't you ashamed to steal our work, so to speak? A big part of MT is preparing users, so I am very happy to take any questions also about the data security, privacy, and so on. But for starters, let's talk about how SMT works. What are the main principles? Let's start with Latvian sentence vaitev ir labākā ideja. Man gan ir, I have a better idea. So let's say we don't know Latvian. We will translate it into Estonian using SMT. And it works on the principle that we take a lot of texts in both languages, and the machine learns the language through translation. They're called parallel corpuses. So basically, it's a set of data that has input language, output language, and a set of examples. Here you have three sentences. Man ir labākā ideja. I have a better idea. Tev jābūt daudz pārtulkotu tekstu. You should have a lot of translated text. And Latvian, vai viņam ir pārtulkotu tekstu? Do they have translated text? So those who speak Latvian, can you tell me what the word ir means? You're all correct. Let's say we're not assuming anything about the languages, their structures, their similarities, differences. Can we take these texts and find the meaning of the word ear? I think we can. We see that ear is in the first set of sentences and our last set of sentences, and there's only one word that is also present in both these sentences. So therefore we can assume that since words have their partner, so to speak, in the other language. I could be wrong completely, but statistically saying, we can deduce what is the meaning of the word ir. And here we have two words, partolkutu tekstu. We can deduce that it is translated text, tõlketekst in Estonian. And let's not translate word for word, because sentences in natural languages, they're not just a set of words. There are idiomatic phrases and so on. We learn languages by phrases. And further on, we can assume that man is me and labaka idea is better idea. Jabu doubts are more complicated constructions. If it is used often and it occurs often in text, then our philosophy is that we can use it. And in practice, we see that using these word pairs, we get better results than if we don't use them. Now, using the knowledge that we gain from this analysis, we should be able to translate these sentences. We can deduce that vai was kas in Estonian, do. Ir is have, and labaka idea is better idea, dev is you. So the lexicon we have limited, and we saw the main idea of how machine translation works. So MT learns automatically, but the limitation that comes along with it is it can have errors. It's not a mathematically precise process that only gives correct and incorrect answers. It's more like aiming at a target. We can either get closer to a bullseye or farther from bullseye. And for the machine to learn, we need to learn, of course, the machine needs to learn words and phrases that are going to be used. However, it also learns rules and statistical connections between two languages, how to rearrange syntax. But from monolingual texts, the machine learns fluency, for example, which is also necessary. But in summary to this introduction, to create translation text with SMT, you don't have to know either the target language or the source language. We just have to know how to create a machine translation system. I will have more examples from real life soon, but in general, as developers, we don't even need to know the input or the output languages to develop machine translation, meaning that we can translate from any two languages. So it's not only just Estonian to Russian to Latvian to Chinese or Hebrew. Tilde says that they translate from Estonian to English. It's not the only thing. Of course, what the field is important as well. And we do have to consider the fields as well. For example, whether if we train the system with just a regular everyday text, then it might not work with legal text, or it has to be specifically modified. We've also done experiments with, for example, Bibles. We've taken a modern-day Bible and an old Bible from the 18th century, and we have trained the machine with those types of texts as well. We haven't taken a boring text and tried to make it more fun. We haven't tried yet. But if you have any instances that do it on a regular basis, then we're open to all kinds of suggestions. The only thing we need is translation examples. We saw 3 translation examples now, but in reality we use huge quantities of them. So as a rule, a good quantity would be about 1 million words in each language. And since sentences are of varying length, then about 100,000 sentences would be good. Which doesn't mean that if you have 90,000, you won't get anything. You will. However, the smaller the collection of words and sentences, the harder it is for the system to work later. When it comes to Estonian English, there are only over 100 million couples of phrases that are used. And as by way of comparison, we have the European Parliament meeting text, for example. From Estonian to English, they have 650,000 sentence pairs that the Parliament provides. Between Finnish and Estonian, we have about 2 million. That's a lot of words. So 100 million sentences, that's about 1,000 very, very thick books, so it's a lot of material. And it's good that this material is available in big repositories for what is the result. If we have the sentence, "You are the dream girl of millions of fans" in English, and here it's translated into German, and the word fans is meant to use a ventilator. And even into French, and also translated as a ventilator, as a fan. If we put, I'm taking a German course, and do Google Translation, for example, then even now it translates to, of course I will take German, as in take Germany, the country. But approaches have to be language specific. It does not have to be language specific. When we talk about the motor, the fact that we use full sentences when we learn, that means that within that phrase, since somebody has used it, and assuming that it's been used correctly, then within that word you have conjugation, structure, style, all kinds of semantics, pragmatics. It's correct within that phrase. So that's the strong part of SMT. I would like to end on a positive note. However, unfortunately, there are some lacking aspects as well. So the same thing that was a benefit before, it's not language dependent, it's also a con. There are 2 weak points as well that haven't been noticed. The style has to be correct, and there are cultural registers that, for example, don't translate from Estonian to French at all, because in the cultures, people relate to each other differently. The traditions, ways in which people communicate are different. For example, the French are much more sophisticated in their expression than Estonians are. And, of course, there's that critical amount of people who speak the language, which inhibits the number or the size of the corpus. And Estonian, of course, few speakers. Of course, I'm sure that there are other weak points as well. There are some that are more severe, there are some that are not as severe. But I would like to argue for Estonian, when it comes to the amount of corpora we have, even for Estonian, we do have quite a sizable amount of data already, even though we don't have that many speakers. Of course, it depends on the field. For some fields, it's more. For some fields, it's less. If everything worked, of course, Tilde wouldn't have work at all. Everything would be automatic. And since MT doesn't work that well, the machinists have work right now to get this machine to work in the end, to put all kinds of improvements in practice. And I would say that the amount of data that we have is clearly sufficient to manage the work in the end. But when it comes to using phrases, to translated phrases, then if everything is correct within the phrase, then outside of the phrase, we will put them together according to some statistical models. We try to recognize the context, but sometimes we don't succeed. Let's put it mildly. So MT and this phrase-based approach, of course, they have very many challenges on different levels. However, when we talk about whether MT is good or bad, what is good translation? What is good machine translation in the end anyway? At this point, let's look at this example. A person translated this from whatever language into English, and a person as their output has said, do not put this product, it is their craziest invention. And the system says, do buy this product, it's the craziest invention. Who says that this is a good machine translation? We don't have an answer to what is good MT. It depends on how we are using it, where we are using it. If we look at the Google output, for example, if we're trying to understand a website, even the Google Play descriptions that you mentioned, or Google websites, of course, those are some severe problems if the output is like this. But if there is post-MT processing, then it's actually not so bad. We just need to add one more word. Editing in this context is quite simple. However, if we look at the human translated phrase, the battery lasts 6 hours and it can be fully charged in 30 minutes. And the system offers us this output: 6-hour accumulator, half an hour to recharge completely. There is no grammar, everything is off. However, we can see that a person can understand it. Of course, it's not usable, you can't publish it, but it's comprehensible. Whether 6 is a number of word, it's not significant to understanding it. Recharge completely, of course, again, comprehensible, half an hour, 30 minutes, again, no difference. So, again, it depends on the place of application, how it is used. The idea comes through. But if we had to use it in text, from a point of view of editing afterwards, it's a nightmare. The point I'm trying to make is the answer to what is good machine translation depends on what it will be used for. As an expert in the field, I would say that humans made two changes, 2 mistakes, whereas the machine just 1. So recharged in Estonian, for example, has 2 different meanings. So as an expert in the field, I would say that it would take me 15 seconds to fix this text. So I would say that this translation is actually it was done by me. So I'm a computer specialist. I'm not a translation specialist. So that's one thing. But what I was trying to talk about is the quality of machine translation. Now, how machine translation is used is very varied. We've heard some examples today about how companies use it. Big corporations like Amazon or smaller companies. A lot of them use also the post production editing. The texts are edited by hand after they are machine translated. And here I'm sure that professional translators have a lot of questions and comments. Translators don't like this work too much because it's not like translating, it's more like editing. Nobody wants to fix mistakes. So these kinds of users, these post-production editors, they have to also be trained. They have to be taught how to use this tool and how to make it work for them depending on how they need it. Since in professional translation, translation memories are used, lexicons are used, then it's integrated into machine translation as well. With integrated translation memories, the machine translation fills in the blanks, basically. And translators also have a special notation when it's machine translation. They know to pay more attention to it. And you also have several matches that you can choose for whatever text it is. We had a long discussion about different languages, but one of the biggest European Union projects so far had to do with subtitles. And actually, good machine translation showed to raise the effectiveness of the work by 10 to 90%, to 110 to 190%. Translators, as I mentioned, they don't like editing, as I mentioned, but with MT, a person is necessary. They have to read it first, and they have to assess whether the text is usable at all. It may turn out it's a mess. It can't use it at all. Then the translator might go have a smoke, come back, and then translate the text themselves. Now, what we also looked at was that translation output trustworthiness. By evaluation, we can weed out the bad from the good. We can also indicate to the translator that this is done by a machine, this was done by a person, and they know how to approach the text. And there are also some parts where we might cross out the text completely and indicate to the translator that they would have to do the text all over again. So this kind of evaluation and marking the text helps the translator a lot. It helps reduce their stress in using MT. And when it comes to the subtitle project that I mentioned, then by using MT, the productiveness went from 33% to 46%. So this hike in effectiveness is something that we also do always see with MT. Now, where is MT suitable? Where is it not? It goes well with a limited lexicon, with fixed terms. For example, with legal text, it works well. Technical documentation, economic text, software localization. Of course, there are problems with context in these texts as well. However, when automatic translation is involved, the end result is better and it is suitable for use. So, in other words, MT is best suitable for the work that is boring for people. So, repetitive phrases, technical terms that are always the same. So, it helps with these things, and the person can do the more creative part of the work. And basically takes care of the part that the person doesn't want to do in the end. Because in the end, who wants to type the same thing all the time? MT is also quite good for things such as news or speeches in Europarl, for example, or for subtitles. So it's hard to say whether it's very well suitable or not. It can be used in this context, and there are some success stories in this field. But here we also have to be quite careful and always check whether the quality of the expression is as high as we would expect. In a short-term, medium-term perspective, is never going to use MT for literature, for poetry. It's not what MT was meant for. MT is meant for more technical fields with a limited set of terminology and with clear, more straightforward sentences. So you basically have to know where to use it. How much time do I have left? So what does SMT quality depend on generally? Without going very much in detail into the approach or the extent, first of all, the quality depends on how suitable it is for the language pair, for the data, and the machinist. We are the ones who take care of that side of things. What we can do, if we know, for example, why Google Translate translates the way it does, we know what kind of typical mistakes it makes and how we can improve those. Of course, not make them ideal, but we can make them a bit better. We know the typical problems. We have the approaches to take care of those problems. And the main thing that we as machinists can do is to analyze how the translation systems work and how we can adjust it to the tasks that are assigned to the machine. So it's not a universal translation tool. It has to work with a specific field, with specific languages, and in that way it works the best. The second thing that influences the quality is the data. Whether functionality, while functionality was our role, then the data is yours. The amount of data we have is very important. The more words we have, word forms we have, the better the system can use it. The more words and word forms it knows, the more fluent it can be and grammatically correct. So for the phrases to be in the correct order, or for the words to be in the correct order, we need a lot of data. If you have a large collection of text, for example, and its translation. That's all you need to forward to us. We can take care of the rest. Now, monolingual texts are also important for us. They are, of course, easier to obtain, and they influence how grammatically correct the output is. The text field is very important. What field the text comes from. Again, we don't use literature to teach these machines. So, in order to translate text that interests you, you have to provide us with the data where somebody already has translated these texts so that these machines can imitate the behavior of humans to the best that they can manage the task. If you have, if you want to start with using machine translation, or in other words, if you're wondering why I should use MT and not Google Translate, why should I turn to the machinists? The answer is, if you're talking about a specific field, if you have some private data, for example, that you don't want to give to Google, again, Google doesn't adjust itself. It's very good for general text like news or subtitles or whatever. And Google Translate is not meant for legal text, for technical text. But if you create a system that is adjusted to this specific topic, to the specific area, then MT can translate much better than Google Translate or some other big systems. Everything starts with the data that you provide for us, depending on the field that you want to use it in. And a collaboration partner, a machinist, will analyze the data that you provide for us, and in collaboration with you, we'll offer up a solution. We'll try and see how to use it in the best way. And when you get feedback from translators about this doesn't work, that doesn't work, then we can use all that information to improve the system and to polish it. Now, about the privacy, data protection, this is something that we hear about a lot from translation bureaus. They have text and they are copyrighted, and it doesn't belong to the copyright doesn't belong to the translation bureau. It has some sensitive information, some numbers in it, for example, that people don't want spread. If you have a machinist you're working with, you give the data to the machinist. It's not Google, it's not stored anywhere, this information that you give them. You can enter into a confidentiality agreement, and you can be sure that this information is only used in a way that you will have an in-house MT system, and that's it. However, if you have data that can be publicized, you can make public. You can also use anonymization, which means taking away all kinds of information that links it to any people, persons, legal or otherwise. We can basically mask the information. However, if the data can be public, you can talk about bigger volumes. You can create a big machine translation system that you can adjust to your own field. And that will be combined with everybody else who has also made their data public. So, secondly, in Europe, in Estonia, there are a lot of research groups who are trying to improve the functionality of MT, and this is done through using some concrete data. And if you have some particularities to the data, when you're publishing or making these texts public, then you are giving all these research teams the permission essentially to use your text, and that will enormously help the field develop. I have gone way over my allotted time, but what I would like to leave you with is that in Estonia, in Europe, and in the world, SMT, MT, a hybrid MT functionality is being researched heavily, it's being developed a lot, and it's being applied practically a lot on very different machines. The fact that it doesn't work right now, we're working on it. You can always do things better, things are getting better, new methods are being developed. For example, those that take into account the Finno-Ugric languages and the Estonian language that Google isn't interested in right now. We are working on it. It is getting better. And it depends directly on the accessibility of the translated text, or how much translated text you have, the data that you have, and if at all they should be fit for making public, then we really highly recommend trying one of these things that I mentioned in my presentation. But now I would like to end, and I will gladly take your questions.
A question. You mentioned something about French Estonian. This was the example of how, Monsieur, please can you come and visit me, and the Estonian being really blunt. In Estonian it is really blunt and short, and without too much flowers. But let's take an example. There's a French book where a question of this sort is asked, but if you have a professional translator, he will have to take the cultural background into account. They know that in an Estonian book, this long, really polite these two books end up with either the University of Tartu, Tilde, whatever. We can try and make these phrases correlate. Will in future machine translation be able to translate it? Well, if it's often used, and if Tilde is really focused on exactly this, if it's something that is being used often, it is represented in the corpora, then sure, and it can. How many people have Windows in Estonian? You have a Windows Live Family Security Filter in Estonian. And in Estonian it says reset computer, translated really roughly in Estonian, into Estonian. Did you understand this Estonian? But if this is something that is in the knowledge base of Tilde, and instead of restart your computer, you have to say that in order to reset, you will have to adjust the family settings, etc., then this has nothing to do with translation anymore. And it brings dangers with it. Danger number one, depending on how, if the high quality Estonian English Estonian will be widely spread in Estonia, then we can have dangers. For example, like computer viruses. At the moment, if we get an email, we can just look at it and say it's not written by Estonian, it may contain a virus. But if this gets better, this distinction disappears. And or a number of different Estonian phrases, like for example, like skull. It means roughly in Estonian it means dead man's head bone. But turning back to the first question, in order to translate properly, you need to make the correct selections in the translation also. The machine learns what's being given it. If there is a proper, correct data set, then the computer is able to learn it. If you give a command that starts with damn, for example, which is really typical for Estonia, then of course we can do it also. But what concerns the last question, it was more of a philosophical kind. It has more to do with policy. Yes, language technology is important. Of course, we will try and use it with every language, which is the opinion of the European Union at the moment, but this is not the only factor. There are other influencing factors. We want texts and materials to be machine translated. This technology is developing and it will not disappear. Of course, certain languages like Spanish, German have much more resources. And this was a real danger that you mentioned with these Google translated spam messages containing viruses. Germans, Spaniards, Brits should also already have this problem, but they don't. It all boils down to whether we use the right system at the right time and right place. For example, I've heard that school children translate their homework with Google Translate. They hand it in, and they expect it to be correct. It all starts with educating the customers. We need to educate the users on what to use it, a certain thing for, what not to use, how to use. These are all important and interesting questions. Of course, that also that these translations will reach the internet and start influencing how languages are learned, etc. This is a topic for another session. What else is a bottleneck besides the lack of data? For example, the European documents have documents of the European Union have mostly been translated by people, by humans, in a relatively orderly fashion. How much data do we need in the end? We can't keep adding forever. Of course, not forever. It is important that the machine needs to have enough data to be able to make generalizations. If we, for example, are sure that if a certain sentence is correct and we translate a text sentence by sentence, what we have is translation memory. But if we aren't really sure of perhaps a certain sentence, but the content, then this is more machine translation. And in order to be able to keep correctly translating single sentences and contexts, then we need more data. We need context. And of course, there are errors that can happen. Phrases are used in wrong context. For example, also the word order or sentence order may be wrong. We need simplification methods built into the technology. And you are right, only by adding data and data and data, we won't get to the ideal machine. In addition to that, we really need to take a close look at what is being done correctly, what is being done wrong, and we need to react. In addition to that, we need to set realistic goals. We have to make sure that certain things cannot be ideal. Are we speaking of a system that gives you the general idea but does some mistakes, but we are okay with that, or do we speak about a system where we need to correct mistakes?
That from one side, to make these current techniques, statistical machine translation, to work better, it's definitely there's a need for much more data to train these machine translation systems to translate better. But there's another aspect that these statistical methods that are currently dominating in machine translation are by far are not meeting the needs for quality translation, and but there is a need for next breakthrough, next generation of machine translation research. And we in this region, we understand these problems very well, but it's very important to vocalize this, to speak about this in Brussels, in Luxembourg, when our representatives of our countries are participating in this decision-making about where to target research and innovation activities of European Commission in the future. And unfortunately, we were not active enough in the previous period. So in current work program of Horizon 2020, there is no dedicated objective on language technologies and machine translation. The new discussion started where to target EU research in the from 2018 to 2020. And I think this is the right moment where we have to speak about the need to target research in this field, to get the next breakthrough, to address complexities of languages like Estonian, Finnish, Latvian, and many others actually. But this is a two-way approach. One, we have to get the use of current methods by using what's available now, and what we are talking now today, and also if you have any possibilities to involve in these discussions on EU policy in research and development, to join forces of representatives of our language community, Baltic countries, Nordic countries, and others, to push decisions for targeted research in this area. Thank you.
This is a very good point. I only disagree that we were not active enough. I think we were active, but it is a real problem that now the amount of funding is reduced for that, and there's no targeted call for it. So that would be something for the European Commission to notice if they really want things to improve. Even last time in the FP7 call, there were several attempts of developing machine translation functionality specifically for the Eastern European or Central European languages like the Baltic and the Slavic and the Nordic languages. Of course, it's very competitive, and well, some projects got chosen, some did not. But at least there were definite efforts dating back to at least 2010, so not last year, but 2010, to exactly make an EU-level project on languages, including Estonian and also Latvian and also Czech and others. But I mean, it's a competitive field, so we'll do better next time.
Just 2 words. So currently there are no targeted calls, but we try to integrate multilingualism and language technologies in big data related topics in the work program. But this is the current situation. And the Connecting Europe facility is currently funding activities in this field. And about the European Union, let's say, language repository and why it doesn't always work and things like that. It is good to remember as well that Euramis, which is the huge translation memory of the EU institutions, it is sort of EU. EU is not a domain. So within this domain of EU texts, you have automotive industry or automotive texts, you have chemistry, you have extremely complicated technical fields, you have insurance, finance. So going into very detailed level of expertise. And there you don't have, it's not, I mean, the domain-specific material is not very big. So it's about domain adaptation implementation really, and to build like machines which are tailored for specific domains. Thank you.
nii, on kellelgi veel küsimusi?
Any more questions? If not, then let's keep going. Thank you. We have to go to lunch. It has been really interesting, but we have fallen behind schedule so much that we need to reorder it. First we have the lunch, then we have Viljar from the Data Protection Inspectorate. Then with starting at 3 o'clock we will start again. And this bilingual info systems discussion, that will be the final order of the agenda for today. But